Hey, what's up? This is Finx MTG, and I have a deck tech on Queen Marchesa, a great commander to play. It focuses on the Monarch mechanic. As you can see here, when this card enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch. We rate this one around a power level 7. It can deal with a lot of different threats, and the best part is just fun and enjoyable games that you get out of using this Monarch mechanic. For 4 mana, red, white, black, and a colorless 3/3 Death Touch Haste. Can attack as soon as it comes in, but when you get the Monarch, you get to draw a card at your end step. And again, once the Monarch is started, unless that player is eliminated from the game, it maintains on the game state. So when a player gets attacked and they are dealt combat damage, the one that deals the combat damage gets the Monarch. So it kind of goes around the table as you're fighting matches, and it encourages people to actually attack each other instead of sitting back and turtling. So we're going to go through all the cards in this deck that I have, and we'll see, you know, the crazy interactions that you can get out of it. If you want to see the full deck list, check out the full deck list on Moxfield. Now, the key feature with this one is that once you become the Monarch, okay, you have your commander. You don't want to really block with your commander unless you had to. But at the beginning of your upkeep, if an opponent is the Monarch, you create a special friend. That special friend being an assassin token with Death Touch and Haste. Yes, it's a 1/1, but it has Death Touch. So when somebody else takes that Monarch from you right after you played your commander, it's fine because you're going to be getting it back with your Haste guy on your upkeep. You can go on to combat that turn and get the Monarch feature back. Nobody wants to block the Death Touch guy because they're going to lose their creature and people are building their board states. So that is the key feature that is the enabler. It's also creating creature tokens, which you know in Magic there's a lot of ways to take advantage of that. So I'll put the buddy down there. And we have a lot of different ways that you can go with this deck. And again, this one is focusing on a Monarch theme. So we'll go with what happens when you get the Monarch. Why is that so good? Okay, so you're drawing an extra card at your end step. Doesn't sound so great, right? But then let's bring in the big cards that really have a nice effect when you have the Monarch. So we have 3 enchantments that have a big focus here. Not only that, when these come in, they make you the Monarch as well. At the beginning of your upkeep, it deals 2 damage to any target. But if you're the Monarch, it deals 7 damage to that player or permanent instead. So 7 damage every upkeep is pretty intense for anybody. I mean, you can be killing everybody else's commanders, or you could be dealing damage straight to the face. And the way this deck works in this current build is you're basically whittling down the opponents. You're encouraging opponents to attack each other, let the Monarch move around a bit as you're setting up your board state with cards like this. You don't play this right in the beginning, right? You set up your board state, and then you play this when you think you can hold that Monarch ability, and then you're getting the real value. There's other enchantments like Court of Ambition, which can be pretty cruel on your opponents here. When it enters the battlefield, you're the Monarch, but during your upkeep, it triggers. Each opponent loses 3 life unless they discard a card. If you're the Monarch, they have to lose 6 life or discard 2 cards. So again, that adds up really quick. A few turns with these on the board, and it puts you in a good state to be winning the game. And finally, we have the last enchantment, Court of Grace. This one, you would be making a 1/1 spirit creature token with flying, but if you're the Monarch, it's a 4/4 angel. So you'd be making a 4/4 angel every turn that you can maintain that Monarch. And again, we have them in the full art because it looks awesome. So that's the basic idea, right? You get Monarch, you have these kind of special enchantments that work really well with that ability. And you have some big heavy hitters here. If you're going for your win conditions, you have Aurelia, the War Leader, right? So when this comes out, the idea is that you already have a board state. This has haste as well. So it comes out, you can attack, and then you untap all creatures you control, and you get another attack phase. So after people have been whittling down, trying to get the Monarch, they want to draw that extra card every turn, then you bring this guy out, and you can hit for a lot of damage. Same thing with Elish Norn. It's a board wipe for the opposing players, and a Lord effect for your creatures. So it pumps all your stuff and makes everybody else's stuff and kills a lot of tokens. It makes everybody else's stuff weaker. So this being on the board, you can do some crazy things. And you also get cards like Gisela, Blade of Gold Knight, flying for a strike. But the big thing here, if damage would be dealt to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, that source deals double damage to that player or permanent. Instead, when you take damage, you take half that damage rounded up. This encourages when somebody else is attacking another player for the Monarch, they're going to be dealing double the damage, and that really adds up very quickly when opponents are swinging at other players. So you have a couple of good cards there that can come out and really seal the game once you're getting into a good spot. You also have ones that can do single target elimination, or they can really do damage to a lot of players at one time. When you get a lot of mana on the board, you can play a card like this from Lord of the Rings, 4th Earlungus. I don't know why that was so hard to say. But you create a bunch of 2/2 human knight creature tokens with trample and haste. And then you can attack with them, get the Monarch. If you have any of these enchantments out again, remember, it will work well with them. And imagine you play that when you have Elish Norn out, and instead of 2/2s, they are 4/4s. Some pretty stuff can happen, pretty big stuff can happen with that. And finally, for another win condition, we also have the Kiki-Jiki and the peek at how it works Mirror Breaker combo. So we do not have specific tutors so much that we're going directly for this, but if we draw into it and we need to end the game, then we go with this one. It does cost a lot of mana. So this one's 5 mana to put Kiki-Jiki on the board, and then you have Felidar Guardian. So the idea is that you can flicker Kiki-Jiki here and continue to make copies of Felidar Guardian, and you get a bunch of creatures with haste that can attack that turn and kill all your opponents in infinite number. You say you want 5,000 of them, you can make 5,000 of them, and you're off to the races to win on that turn. So that's what we do if the game goes too long, but it's a lot more fun winning with these other win conditions here. So of course, those are some big mana spells, right? This game is going to get a little bit grindy, right? Because you're slowly building value over time with your cards, and with the Monarch ability, you want to draw additional cards. So you need some mana, and you need to be able to cast your big spells. So we do have a lot of ramp in here, and I love it. Playing this deck, it feels like you're never short of mana, and you can play those extra cards you're drawing by having cards like the Staples Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Thought Vessel. This also has the dual purpose of you have a lot of cards in your hand, and you're going to be having to discard them. We don't have a lot of recursion in this deck, so we have Thought Vessel so that we do not have to discard our cards because it has no maximum hand size. We have cool looking talismans here, just your standard package. But you can see how many different cards we have here. Felwar Stone. So remember, this is a red, white, black, or if you want to sound like you're important and you know how to play Magic, you say Mardu color pie here. So Felwar Stone, a lot of players, somebody's going to have the colors you need, and Felwar Stone will work. Oh, and there we have the Mardu banner. Boros Signet. Rakdos Signet. We're just throwing every signet we can find in here. And Gilded Lotus, just because this card is very powerful to really cast your big spells when you need them. A lot of people like to take this one out, though, because it is powerful. And we have Orzhov Signet to seal the deal at the end there. So you can see it's a lot of artifact ramp pieces there that we are utilizing. And with that, we'll go into some of the creatures that work towards our game strategy. Xancha, Sleeper Agent, is a lot of fun. Basically, you play this card, it's only 3 mana, and you give it to an opponent, and they have a 5/5 that has to attack somebody besides you. So when you have it on the opponent's side, any player can pay 3, and the controller of this card, meaning that opponent, loses 2 life, and that person draws a card. So if you want to draw cards with it, if the opponents, and it's kind of funny to see because if somebody attacks somebody with the 5/5, another person will get back at them by making them lose 2 life, and they'll draw a card off of it. So it's just a fun mechanic to throw around there. And again, it gets the ball moving on whittling down the opponent's life totals. So this is actually a very good card in this deck. We also have some nice card draw. No peeking at the next cards yet. Mangara the Diplomat. Lifelink, 2/4. There's about 3 or 4 ways to have lifelink abilities where you're gaining life back. This is one of them, of course, with this lifelink gentleman here. But the big item here is that whenever an opponent attacks with creatures, if 2 or more of those creatures are attacking you and or planeswalkers you control, you draw a card. And the one that happens even more frequently, when an opponent casts their second spell each turn, you draw a card. and that is usually triggering a lot of times. The other one, we want disincentives for the opponents to attack us because we want to keep that Monarch ability later in the game. In the beginning, you want it to move around, and then you want to hold on to it when you have card advantage based on the Monarch. Brina. This is a confusing card that you might have to read a few times. Brina the Demagogue, but basically it is encouraging opponents to attack your opponents, right? When they attack your opponents, they get to draw a card and you get counters on your guys. And those counters add up. It's 2+1/+1 counters, but think about this. Each of your opponents is able to do this effect, so it can get really big really quickly. This is a flying 1/3, and if you put it on this one, it can also do some damage and swing in there to get the Monarch back because of the flying evasion ability. So this card works really well here. And again, that also triggers when you attack, right? So you can draw cards there as well. This one is a kind of a fun one. This is a flex slot in the deck. Mari the Killing Quill. So if you read through this one, whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you exile it with a hit counter on it. Then when you have a assassin, a rogue, a mercenary, if you have one of those hit the opponent, you may remove a hit counter from a card that player owns in exile, which is one of the ones that it exiled here. And then if you do, you draw a card and create 2 treasure tokens. So we were talking about how we need mana here because we're drawing a lot of cards. And this has some nice synergies with some other cards in this deck. So make sure you check out some of the cross synergies here that we'll be going through and what other cards work well together, right? Kind of like having a Grim Hireling, which is a rogue, which goes pretty well with the Killing Quill right here, right? So if this one hits an opponent, you can trigger that second ability. And the Grim Hireling is just a great card. This one, when you're hitting an opponent, you create a treasure token, you create 2 treasure tokens. So the idea here is that if you're hitting all 3 opponents, you can create 6 treasure tokens, which is pretty crazy right there. It's almost like playing a dockside. It's great in a lot of decks, and I've actually forgotten about this other ability here, but you have to keep this in mind because there are times when you need to kill a creature on the board and you realize, oh, I had all these treasures. I can give a creature -X/-X as a sorcery, of course, but you can kill one of those other creatures that you wouldn't be able to target otherwise. Great effects on that guy right there. This is one, Kara-Zikar, the Eye Tyrant. Whenever you attack a player, tap target creature that player controls and goad it. Whenever an opponent attacks one of your opponents, you and the attacking player each draw a card and lose 1 life. So they attack your opponent, you're both drawing cards. It helps you, it helps them. It's kind of like this Monarch. It's not a group hug type deck, but it makes other people feel like, okay, we're working together, we're both benefiting. It's not like you're just hurting the other players the whole game, which can get a little rough. This card works really well because this says whenever you attack a player, any of your creatures can attack. It doesn't have to be this guy. You can leave him back and have him be protected so that he's not being taken out, and you can still goad the opponent creatures. And you'll see we have several cards in this deck that have the goad ability because goading works really well here when we want opponents' life totals to be threatened and ours to be protected, right? So they can't attack you if it's goaded, they can't get your Monarch. They'll have to attack somebody else. Now, when we're building up our board state, sometimes we just need a hero to come in and save the day. And that's why Gerard is here, because he's flying the Weatherlight ship around. And when he dies, you exile him and you return to the battlefield all artifact and creature cards in your graveyard that were put there from the battlefield this turn. This can even be used on your own board wipes, or you can be using it, you know, aggressively when an opponent board wipes, you bring back all of your items here. So it's a good way to still extend on the board and not have to worry about everything getting wiped out. Campbell, Consul of Allocation. This is a great card that I feel is underrated. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, that player loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. This is another one of our ways to gain life back after the brutality of war and everybody fighting each other. But this one, you would be surprised how many times this triggers, and it's kind of like Sheoldred. If you've played against the Sheoldred where when an opponent draws a card, they lose 2 life. When you draw a card, you gain 2 life. This is like a mini version of that. It only costs 3 mana, and people usually don't target it right away until they see how much work it's doing. Pretty good. Emberwild Captain. Now we have to have additional cards with the Monarch theme. This is one of them. Enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch, so you don't have to necessarily fight through a wall of defenders that your opponent has. And then when they attack you while you're the Monarch, this card deals damage to that player equal to the number of cards in their hand. So if you play this on turn 5 after maybe you play your commander on turn 4 or 3, and then you play this card next, if they try and attack you to get the Monarch after you get it back, or you use your assassin, you can, jumps around a bit, and then you can use this to protect yourself for a turn, or just punish them for attacking you, which is fun. Butcher of the Horde. This is just a great card in this deck. Sacrifice another creature. Butcher of the Horde gains your choice of Vigilance, Lifelink, or Haste until end of turn. Being a 5/4 flying, that has a lot of utility value, and if you need Lifelink in the late game, you can do that. The Vigilance also helps because you can protect your Monarch ability if you need to, and you don't have to do it, so it's an optional clause there. But the good thing is that you're making a lot of assassin tokens, right? So if you have the assassin tokens just sitting on the board, and again, an interesting feature that I even missed for the first time I read this is that as long as an opponent is the Monarch, you create the token. So it doesn't matter if it's like one is already on the board, it just keeps creating. It's not like Minsk and Boo, right? This one just keeps creating more and more tokens as long as the opponent's got the Monarch. It wants that Monarch bad, and it wants to be sitting on the throne, right? Okay, keep it moving. So we have Nettling Nuisance. This is an odd card that you're probably like, what the heck is this, right? But it's a 3/1 flying. The flying is evasion. You need that when you want to swing in for a little bit of damage, get the Monarch back. And when it hits another player, it gives them a 4/2 red pirate creature token with this creature can't block. The token is goated for the rest of the game. Now think about that. For the rest of the game, they have that creature and it can't attack you, but it has to attack. Some decks don't play a lot of creatures, and if somebody just has like an open board state, they're going to keep swinging at them with a 4/2, which is exactly what you want. It's taking their life total down. It's putting a clock on their gameplay, right? They have to do something, or they're going to lose the game to combat damage eventually. Also, Fairy Rogue. The Rogue goes with the Quill card as well. So we have a few of those synergies in here, which is fun to utilize. Put this one down here. And we go to the next section. We do need some hate cards, some removal. We have Soul Guide Lantern and Bajuka Bog to remove cards from the opponent's graveyard. Those crazy graveyard decks, they can do a lot of different items, and we have to be able to react to that. This one's great because even if they're not utilizing their graveyard that much, you can use it as a cantrip to draw a card. But once it's out on the board, it shuts down a lot of strategies. Bajuka Bog is just so good. I didn't even include it with the lands. I put it over here because if you're playing black, you should have this in the deck. Yes, it comes in tapped. It doesn't matter. It's a free ability that exiles a player's graveyard. So whoever's doing the Reanimator strategy, you just exile their graveyard. Cathar Commando. Now, this is fun because it has flash. So if you're just playing like a normal disenchant or something like that to get rid of an artifact or enchantment, there are a lot of counter spells that can only hit sorceries or instants. This is a creature. Okay, so for 3 mana, 1/2 comes on the board with flash during an opponent's turn, and then you pay to 1 to sacrifice it to kill the item that you need to kill. It's a lot harder to deal with than a disenchant, which people can redirect, or they can play a swan song to cancel or counterspell. Path to Exile. Exile target creature. They get a basic land card. Put that card onto the battlefield tapped and shuffle. It's almost always worth it on a significant creature card that's in play. Lauren of the Third Path. This one's kind of fun because it has vigilance, so it can defend if you needed to in a pinch, as they say. When it enters the battlefield, though, you're destroying up to 1 target artifact or enchantment. Usually use this one just to slow down some of the opponents. Maybe they played a Mana Crypt or a Soul Ring or just something, a Gilded Lotus, something that gives them a lot of mana. Or a utility card. If you see like an Ashnod's Altar that's already out on the board and they're getting ready for their combo soon, you would of course be playing this, taking out those. And you and target opponent each draw a card. This can work in different ways. You can also politic around the board to see when that will give you an advantage, what kind of deals you can make if you utilize that. Next up, Palace Jailer from Lord of the Rings set, which is pretty cool here. When it enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch, but you're exiling a creature an opponent controls until somebody steals the Monarch from you. Anguished Unmaking, 3 mana, you lose 3 life, but you exile target non-land permanent. So almost anything that you need to deal with, this can remove it permanently. that includes indestructible cards, and that's why you need that in there. Dire Tactics, very similar. Exile target creature. And because your commander is human, if we can, human assassin, you don't lose the life. So that's even better. Okay, now that we have the Monarch, we got all these cards. We start getting a board state, right? You have some of your creatures out. Maybe you play one of these, right? And you want to protect yourself. How do you protect the Monarch? Well, we have cards like Delaying Shield. This is pretty incredible. So anytime you need to hold your Monarch for a turn, you play this, and you're taking the damage on your upkeep instead of during the combat step. So it negates the opponent's abilities to take the Monarch from you on their turn through combat damage. Of course, you're still taking the damage, but you maintain the Monarch. Blind Obedience. This one's in here because artifacts and creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. They can't do, actually like our Kiki-Jiki combo here, they won't be able to do this combo if everything comes in tapped, right? Same thing with a Dockside or Tivit deck. They need their artifacts, their treasure tokens to come in on tap to really go off in a single turn. And we have Extort so that we can pay extra mana on every spell we cast, and we make the opponents lose 1 life and we gain 1 life. So we're draining them, and this is another way to gain life if we need it. Punish the people for attacking you, right? Whenever a source an opponent controls deals damage to you, that player sacrifices a permanent. That is a pretty steep cost for most decks to just attack you to get a Monarch and draw 1 extra card a turn, right? So the Truth Seeker, you know, keeps them true to their word and not attacking you. Archon of Coronation. When this enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch, 5/5 flying, and as long as you're the Monarch, damage doesn't cause you to lose life. So how are they going to get the Monarch from you then? I don't know. They're probably going to have to do some crazy shenanigans to kill this guy. Protector of the Crown, very similar. Yes, it's a 6-mana creature, but when it enters battlefield, you become the Monarch, and damage dealt to you is dealt to Protector of the Crown instead. So these are a couple of tricks here where you're able to keep your big enchantments on the board and really get those boosted up abilities for a couple of turns. Next, we have the same one we already went over, Delaying Shield. So we'll just put those down there, and we'll go on to the next section. Oh man, what is that? That's the One Ring. Look at that. So very beautiful card here. The One Ring, protection from everything. Indestructible. When it comes out, you can already start putting burden counters on it, drawing cards. This is just a good card that goes in all decks and is in here for the card draw. And the protection when you want to protect yourself from Monarch. The Wedding Ring. We got both of the rings in here. This one is great if somebody, and one of your opponents is playing something like a Sylvan Library, or they have a Rhystic Study or something like that. You put this card, it puts a copy to the opponent. When they draw a card, you draw a card. The one thing to worry about with this one is that if an opponent has an ability in their deck where they're drawing infinitely, like if that's one of their win conditions, they can deck you by drawing on their side. So you do have to be aware of that, and maybe even have a way to remove this on your board if you need to. But those are 2 great cards right there. And to get some of these powerful cards, we have a few tutors in the deck. We have Gamble, right? So Gamble is great because early in the game, even if it's late in the game, I mean, we have Monarch, we drew some extra cards. You saw how many card draw spells there were. So you can usually discard a card, and it's not the one you gamble for. With this, you can be getting your winning game pieces here, or you could be getting your enchantments. We also have Diabolic Intent. After your assassin has done his job and assassinated an opponent and you become the king or the queen again, you use Diabolic Intent, sacrificing that creature, getting whatever you want. Enlighten Tutor. Search your library for an artifact or enchantment card, reveal it, then shuffle and put that card on top. Usually I'm going for the enchantments with this, but again, you could also get something like Delaying Shield, or you can get the One Ring. There's a lot of different options, all of them great, and depending on the situation, it's very versatile. I like that one. Beseech the Mirror. This is a great card. I couldn't believe it when this came out. So the idea of bargain, you sacrifice, I believe, an artifact or a creature when it is cast, and then you get to do this greater ability. So pretty much what I go for is one of the enchantments, or my favorite, I just get the One Ring. So for 4 mana, sacrificing your assassin token after you're already attacked, you're getting the One Ring on the board and can start tapping and drawing cards, right? And that adds up over time, and you end up drawing so many cards with the one ring. It's great. After that, we have Sidisi, Undead Vizier. Death Touch 4/6. People don't want to attack through that. When he comes on the board, you sacrifice usually another creature, but if you really need something like a board wipe, you can sacrifice him to himself and go find the board wipe. And a nice Tutor there. There you have the Tutor package. Not too big. If you wanted to get crazy, you know, you could be putting in Demonic Tutor, Vampiric Tutor. I feel like that would definitely be upping the power level a lot. And if you're going to do that, you'd be going more for infinite combos than fun damage through attacks. So with that, we have more ways to punish our opponents for attacking us, right? Because we want them to attack our opponents. Whenever an opponent attacks you, you exile the top card of that player's library, and you can play that card as long as it remains exiled, and you can use any mana you want to cast it. So basically, anything they have, you're able to use with this. This is actually pretty good and is a way that gives you card advantage in the sense of you're not drawing the card, but by getting cards from opponents' decks, it's giving you just like one extra card draw, right? No Mercy. Whenever a creature successfully deals damage to you, destroy it. Not too many people are going to attack you with this card on the board. And we have the Urza's Legacy version right here. Very nice. Ink Shield. This one's tough to use. It's 5 mana instant. It's like a fog effect, except it turns all the damage into 2/1 black Inkling creature tokens with flying. So on the swing back, this is usually better if there's only 1 or 2 players left and somebody swings at you with a lot of damage. Maybe they have like a elf deck or a squirrel deck and they hit you with all that damage. You turn the damage into 2/1s and you attack with flyers on the next turn. You can usually close out the game. Deflecting Palm is a lot of fun because sometimes people will get decks with counters or a Voltron type strategy and they'll have one creature that can deal a lot of damage. Nobody expects this one coming. It just comes out of left field and you redirect. Somebody had a 10/10 creature attacking you, you redirect that damage to their face. That's pretty brutal because they think they're going to take you out and you end up sometimes killing them. I've done that in games. Or you can just deal a massive amount of damage to them and maintain the Monarch. Clever Concealment. This is one of the, I guess you would say, flex spots as well. But the idea here is that it can use Convoke. You leave some creatures untapped to block in case somebody wants to attack you. And when you cast this one, you're phasing out non-land permanents you control, which also works well when you have board wipes coming up that you want to do. If you cast this on an opponent's end step, you can phase out your guys. I'm sorry, if you do this during your turn, you phase out your guys, and then you can do the board wipe afterwards, and your guys are still protected. And again, because they pay with the Convoke cost, that's how you can get out multiple spells in a turn with it. Boros Charm. Again, if you're good at Magic, you like to call these modular spells, and they have a lot of nice effects. I've actually won games with this card. I've done the deal 4 damage to target player and won a game with that. We've had the permanents you control gain indestructible until end of turn. And we've even given opponents creatures double strike to finish off another opponent. So there's a lot of different items here, different options that you can choose. And that's why it's so good, is because it fits multiple situations. Again, we're going back to the goading. Goad all creatures your opponents control until your next turn. Those creatures can't block. Okay, so everybody built up board states. You don't want to play this after somebody does some kind of a board wipe or the board gets cleared. But if everybody's starting to build up, it's getting later in the game, you cast this, and that can't block is really big because it just means a lot of damage guaranteed going through to everybody. And look at that cool Lord of the Rings artwork right there. Same thing with Disrupt Decorum. This one doesn't have that block effect, but you gold all creatures you don't control. So they have to attack the opponents. Again, if you want to keep Monarch for a turn or just get the action going. So because we're encouraging so many of these attacks to the other players, we don't have too many board wipes here, but we do have some interesting interaction. We have Crackling Doom. Each opponent sacrifices a creature with the greatest power among creatures he or she controls. Depending on the situation, you could be going after their commanders. You could be going after something if somebody plays a Toxrill or another card that's high mana that can do a lot of damage, and Eldrazi. This is a great card to have. Ruinous Ultimatum. Now this card just pretty much wins games. I mean, when people play Cyclonic Rift, it's pretty rough because it sets the person up for the win. Destroying all non-land permanents instead of returning to them in hand is even better. It's 7 mana, but you're going to get there in the grindy nature of this deck. And casting this, you should be winning in the next couple turns. Again, all of your permanents are still there, all your creatures, and you can just swing in for damage. Farewell is the ultimate reset if you need to get rid of everything on the board and restart. Vandal Blast, a lot of times I'm using this one to slow down opponents that cast a lot of the arcane signet type artifacts. A lot of the, if they have all of those mana rocks, this slows it down to the point where it's like, okay, now we can have time to deal damage to each other. Otherwise, they can get to their combo too quickly, and that's my primary use for that card. Promise of Loyalty. This is our version of a board wipe because we want some creatures on the board, but then sometimes it gets out of hand. We need them attacking the opponents, but if there's too many, we'll say, okay, each of you can creep one creature, but now that creature can no longer attack me as long as it has a vow counter on it. And that's a great one. People have to read that one a couple times to understand it, but it's great in this deck. And it doesn't wipe out everything, so it still keeps pressure on the board. And then we just have one of these Warhammer cards that's just so crazy we had to include it in the deck. Blood for the Blood God. Costs 1 less to cast for each creature that died this turn, kind of like a Blasphemous Act effect. And if you'll notice, we don't have Blasphemous Act in here yet because we really don't want to kill everything on the board and start over the game like that. We want damage to still be flying back and forth and Monarch to be moving around. Anyway, when you play this card, discard your hand, then draw 8 cards, then it deals 8 damage to each opponent and is exiled. So this is great. A board wipe comes in and you have this in your hand. It's basically you're just holding on to cast it once they do their board wipe if you know one's coming. A lot of fun, and that's just one of those also flex card that maybe it's not the most efficient, but man, is that fun when that goes off. So that does it for a lot of the main creatures in this deck and the structure of it. We do also have some interesting land synergies as well. We have the normal, we have 2 fetch lands. We have Arid, Mesa, and Marsh Flats, which can get the Triome because, again, it is 3 different basic land types, which is great. And then we have the Shocklands, Godless Shrine, Sacred Foundry, and we have Access Tunnel, which goes very well with our commander making assassin tokens. So we can make our commander unblockable because it's power 3 or less, or we can make the assassin tokens unblockable and get back our Monarch when we need it. This is a little bit better than the other alternative to this, Rogue's Passage, because Rogue's Passage is 4 mana. So it does what we want for 1 less mana. Throne of the High City. Sacrificing this, you become the Monarch if you absolutely need it. Reliquary Tower in this beautiful Commander Masters art right here. Again, another way to have no maximum hand size. We have this, we have Thought Vessel. If you want, you could put Decanter of Endless Water in here as well. Here we have Windbrisk Heights. The idea of these hideaway lands is that you do an effect. This one is attacking with 3 or more creatures. And then you can play whatever card you hid away from the top of your library for free. Very good in this one because we're going to be attacking. Ejano, Seed of the Empire, just another way if somebody's attacking with you, they think they're fine, they can get through, boom, 4 damage to them, you're not taking my Monarch. Wasteland, because you need to destroy the Library of Alexandria that they have here. But any land that's really threatening, as you can see, the versatility of this deck, no matter what, they have graveyard items. If they have ways to deal damage, you have ways to prevent the damage. You have destroy target non-basic land like Field of the Dead or Dark Depths, or that stupid gate that can make you win the game if you have too many gates on your side. So you always need a card like this in the deck. Core Haven synergizes well with this because if somebody's trying to attack to get through for some damage on you, you can prevent all that damage by target attacking creature. The alternative to this, of course, you could play Maze of Ith, but Maze of Ith doesn't tap for mana. That's the difference. And then you have some more of your standard types of lands that fill out the rest of the deck there. So as you can see, there's a lot of different ways that you can, this is also fun here, sacrificing the creature so that somebody's trying to exile it or kill it or something like that, and you can gain 1 life. You can also, I've seen people put synergies where you steal the other people's commanders or their creatures and then you sacrifice them to this. Fabled Passage and Swamps, Plains, Mountains. And there you go, guys. We have the Queen Marchesa Monarch Commander deck. Ton of fun to play, highly recommended. This version is fun. You can change it around. There's a lot of different sideboard cards. I'll include them on some of the Moxfield link items. You could see on the full deck list, you could put in the Teferi's Protection. You could put in more tutors. There's a lot of different additional cards that can go into this deck that can make it fun. And that's why it's so brilliant, right? It can go to your play style. And I really like the Monarch mechanic and really making Commander about attacking and reacting and talking to the other players and interacting. That's what makes the Commander mode fun. Prevents people from basically playing solitaire until they get their combo and win. All right, guys. Hope you have a great day. I'm out.